Hello, and welcome to Augmented Teachings, where we talk about the things that inspire us to think better, feel better, and in turn be better. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Brandy, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our show today. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Todd Michael Jackson. Hello, Todd.
Hi.
Todd is the creator of Augmented Teachings and the author of God is Greater Than Religion. And now, Todd, let's welcome our guest today, Reverend David Allan Cruz. Thank you so much for being here today, David.
Thank you.
David is a Science of Mind minister, a hypnotherapist with over 20 years' experience, and he is also the author of The Theory of the Mind. We are so grateful to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Yeah, that's great. It's really, really great. We've been looking forward to this for a while, and today is the day that we're here. And thank you, Nikki. Nikki is our producer, and he's awesome. Today's topic is about the 3 spiritual principles of love only, forgive everything, and remember who you are. I'd like to break that down just a little bit.
So right now I feel like in our society, it's kind of like Lord of the Flies, where anybody who hasn't seen it, it's a group of kids get stranded on a deserted island, and they form into 2 factions. You have one faction that's filled with fear, judgment, and punishment mentality, and another group has the mentality of love and acceptance and compassion. And they start warring with each other, and before you know it, the kids that were aligned with fear and judgment start killing off the other kids of love and compassion. And then all of a sudden, when they get down to like 1 or 2 of these kids left, the adults show up. The adults show up, and they kind of snap out of it. They're like, oh my God, we were just killing each other.
And they realize what they were doing.
Well, the adults are now back in the room. So we're going to talk about our society and how we have to remember the 3 spiritual principles, mainly remembering who we are.
Exactly.
So love always. In that scenario, there was no love always. There was not, what's the second one?
Forgive everything.
Forgive everything. There wasn't that. And they did not remember who they were. They de-evolved. One group de-evolved into hate and judgment, with the punishment and anger it turned into violence.
That's an excellent analogy.
Thank you.
And there was a 3rd element in there.
Yes, do tell.
And that was the element of logic. That was the element of balance. That was that kid with the glasses.
Yes.
And he was the one who saw things clearly. He was the one who was able to see how ridiculous it was, and he was the one who had some answers on how to make it right.
Right.
But because he was the weak one, because he had the glasses,
Yes.
Nobody respected him. They didn't recognize his wisdom, and they ended up killing him.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting part of this analogy, because that's similar to what's going on now.
And that's happened through many paradigms, where the one who had the logic, the one that could correct a problem, didn't give both sides what they wanted, so they were removed. You know, it happens a lot of times. I mean, look at Jesus. He was a threat to the power structure, and they removed him.
Yes. So the idea of the 3 spiritual principles is kind of that logical concept, that logical approach to these warring factions to bring it back together into some kind of a unity.
Right.
So the 3 spiritual principles are love only, forgive everything, and remember who you are.
Right.
The remember who you are part, it's remember the truth of who you are.
Right.
Because we tend to find ourselves falling into self-created illusions. And they're not always self-created, because they're introduced to us from the time we're children. But we allow these appearances of self to overwhelm the reality of self. So this concept is asking us to ask the question, who in truth am I?
Right.
And how do I relate to what this thing is that I call the world?
Right. I think when people realize that we spend most of our soul spend most of their time in between incarnations. And in between incarnations, when we're here, our soul moves in between, and we pass away. and we may spend hundreds of thousands of years out of a vessel. We are beings of light, and there is no hate, there is no fear, there is no judgment. You don't meet God. You're enveloped by God's energy, and you shine. Your essence, your soul is beautiful and magnificent, and we forget that. We forget that within ourselves, and we forget that with the people we interact with.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. So the question then becomes why? Why do we forget?
We learn here faster when we are removed from source, and we have to fight our way back towards it. So this planet is one of the hardest ones to learn on. This 3D reality is very hard to learn on because we don't have source constantly there. We have this vessel that acts as a hurdle, as layers of resistance to source. But when we learn love through this avenue, we learn much faster than it just being given to us like it is back home. So some souls never come here. Some souls do all their learning on the other side of the vessel, on the other side of this 3D reality, without a vessel ever. But it takes much longer. When we learn here, we learn much faster. What we could do in 100 lifetimes here would take millions of years on the other side of the veil. And that's one of the things. This is like the express lane for soul development because it's so difficult. But if you can make it here, if you can learn unconditional love here, you can make it anywhere.
The idea of loving only is a challenge as opposed to a naturally programmed condition that we're born with.
Right.
We have to learn how to love, and we have to learn how to love only.
Yes.
Right.
And that doesn't come easy. So,
it does not come easy.
So
For the soul development here.
Something I do rideshare, right? And I'll explain to the passenger in the back how this works. And I said, I'll be driving the vehicle, and I'll be like, okay, you have a soul that's only been here 2 or 3 times, right? And they just don't have the tools to overcome fear, judgment, and punishment, and hate, and greed, and ego. They don't have the tools to overcome that. And they have the soul. They have the soul in the back seat, and fear and ego are driving that car. Fear and ego are driving that car. But you have a soul that's been here 10, 15, 20 times. Now the soul kind of has tools to keep the ego and the fear in check. You got a soul that's been here 50 times. Now fear and ego are in the back seat, and the soul is driving the vehicle. Mm-hmm. Then you have a soul that's been here 100 times. Mm-hmm. Now fear and ego are in the trunk. And now you have the mind of a Buddhist monk. You've overcome all materialism, all hate, all judgment.
So you're talking about spiritual evolution.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
On a metaphysical level.
Yes.
Spiritual evolution as souls returning to this human form.
Right. Mm-hmm.
However number of times they might need to do that, but each time they do, they are evolved beyond what they were before.
Innately, they bring more to the table. So
here's a question.
Go ahead, please do.
Does that mean then that those who are not quite as evolved because they haven't reincarnated that many times, does that mean then that during this lifetime they can't evolve?
Oh, they can, but they won't make huge jumps. We all make small jumps. So you say you have a second grader, right? And they're learning from a second grade book. They don't know algebra.
Correct.
Does that mean they're a bad student? No. Not at all. They're a second grader learning to be a third, and a 10th grader is learning to be an 11th. So they're not bad souls. They have not had the opportunities to learn what an older soul was able to learn through its incarnation. Okay. So there's you'll have souls there that are based in fear and judgment and ego and greed. They're not bad souls. They just not have learned this, what an older soul has learned. So what they'll do is they'll come back in the area that they need the most improvement so that they can achieve this. So when you have a soul that's, say, racist, right? Mm-hmm. If a soul is racist, the easiest way for that soul to overcome that racism is to be born in the ethnicity that had overly scrutinized in the past.
To learn
that is
knowledge.
That is certainly a way of learning. Yes, right. Absolutely.
And a lot of times people say, "Well, that's a learned experience." It's like, wait a second, my grandparents on my dad's side were both very racist. All three of my siblings on my dad's siblings on that side were all racist, but my dad was not. That's why some people that are white are racist and some are not. Some have been around the block. Some have been other ethnicities. So they've learned compassion for all people. And they've learned over time to see the person inside and not the color of the skin.
Innately on that soul
Innately.
level. Right.
So if one is allowed to recognize that with regards to the universe, time is irrelevant, then then we don't worry. Your concept would work because we don't worry about how many reincarnations it takes because time is irrelevant.
Exactly.
It's just a repetition, a learning process that can take eons, but there's no such thing as eons.
Right.
So that goes back to the concept and the reality that everything is now anyway. So here we are. Doing this now. Now, since I am here doing this now, do I want to just say, I'll just do what I'm going to do and know that I'll move on to that next level, then I'll come back and I'll be wiser even if I don't have to try hard? Or do I want to try hard?
The whole reason why I created this show is so that people actually know what's on the test so that they will try harder. So when you go back home, there's something called a past life review. Every soul goes through it. You go to heaven, you go to your past life review. During this past life review, you get judged on one thing and one thing only. You don't get judged on how much money you have, what religion you are, what ethnicity. It doesn't matter. You only get judged on one thing: how you treated others, how you treated other human beings. Because, in fact, every human being has a soul, and every soul is a direct manifestation of Source.
I got a question for you, Todd. Who's doing the judging?
You are. So yourself.
Okay.
When you go back home and your soul and your vessel are split apart, right? That ego and that fear stays with the vessel. It's dead. It becomes a carcass now. Your soul returns back home being able to truly see what it had done. Because not only do you see what you've done, you feel what you have done because it's overlaid by the vibration of God. So if I, told something nice to Brandy, I would feel that love well within her. If I was mean to her, I'd also feel it diminish.
Because of that vibration that is created, and that vibration never, energy is never destroyed.
Correct.
It can never be created or destroyed. It's just transmuted, right? Yes. And transformed. So I believe that our vibration creates an imprint into the tapestry of life. And so whatever, Todd is he's not doing anything to me, but whatever energy I am creating within myself in regards to his actions or whatever he is, sharing with me, that is going to be felt and rippled out forever. And so when we are outside of these vessels and outside of these egos, and we're back into that whole vibration of love only, right? Because on the other side of the veil of forgetfulness, outside of these bodies, we are back into that vibration of oneness. We are always there, but when we're here, we forget that we have that separation. But when we are back over to the other side without these vessels and these egos telling us, you're different, I'm different, we're all individualized expressions, now that can be felt through everybody because there is no separation. We are all back into that puddle or that pool or ocean of oneness. So if I'm creating hate, division, anything within my area here, and I'm putting that energy out into the universe, that will be felt by me and by everybody else that created. So if I'm creating hate for anybody, I'm going to feel what I created on the other side because now there's no separation. So I'm going to feel that vibration.
So that past life review that I've talked about, it serves several purposes. One is to see how well you did while you were here. If you raised the vibrations of people around you, or you lowered the vibrations of people around you. And sometimes the past life reviews are so painful, it'll bring a soul to its proverbial knees and start weeping so uncontrollably because of the amount of pain and suffering they caused while they were here. But it also, so when your past review has been recorded, So is yours, so is yours, so is yours, so is yours. So I'll be able to feel everything. When I replay this scene right here in my past review, I can know what each one of you are thinking and feeling when I'm speaking or when I'm interacting with you.
You're just defining what I was talking to a client just Saturday, yesterday, that I call my version of hell. My version of hell is, after the death experience, being able to hear everyone's opinion of me.
Right.
And it's kind of like, what were you creating, right?
and if I haven't released my ego at that point, then that can potentially be a very painful experience.
Right.
But the challenge then becomes, can I, at any point, and it almost doesn't matter if it's before or after death, but can I at any point release the ego to such a degree that when I see or hear those thoughts, those opinions, that I don't think of them as painful experiences?
Right.
That I can look at them objectively, decide for myself how true I feel they are, and simply say, oh yeah, I really was an asshole, wasn't I?
Yeah.
And it's a learning experience for your soul. So I do want to just touch really quickly because sometimes when we talk about the judgment on the other side, right? And you're like, okay, but who's going to be judging you? But we have to break down what that judgment is. Right. And I believe it's really observing and taking inventory of what's what on your soul's development for that lifetime.
Right.
So we're not judging ourselves as, man, I shouldn't have done that, or that was bad, or this person was bad, or anything like that, because it's just a learning experience. So are we going to tell the 2-year-old toddler, you're bad because you don't know how to brush your teeth? No, we're not going to tell a 9th grader, you're bad because you don't know how to do whatever, calculus
Advanced
or whatever. I don't even know.
calculus.
Exactly. Right. And so when we're on the other side of the veil and we are purely spirit and we are purely our soul, we don't have that ego mind saying, oh, that person shouldn't have done that. And we're not judging as that, but we're more taking inventory and assessing what's what, so that at our next incarnation, that soul can now make better choices and to drive that ego and to just evolve. Right?
So getting back to what you were talking about, it only depends on what your actions and your intent were that created that situation. So say you're walking to a grocery store and somebody looks at you and doesn't like you because you remind them of an uncle that was mean to them. You had nothing to do with that.
Right, that wasn't your intent.
So that was not your intent. That's all them. It's not you. Now, if you're mean to somebody, you will feel that. And when you look at the way social media is now, God is everywhere. So on the other side of the veil, we can travel at the speed of thought because God is everywhere and we're part of God again, right? So if you type something mean, or say you're a troll, internet troll, and you type something mean attacking a whole group of people, every person that reads that and feels sorrow or pain or anger, you're going to feel that in all its existence because you created that. Your intent created that.
Yeah.
So now you look at some of these right-wing politicians who attack whole groups of people. They're going to feel that on their side of the veil, and it's going to be enormously bad. It's going to be detrimental in a way that they don't realize.
And so now you're talking about the essence of the concept of remember who you are, and as I said, remember the truth of
who you are.
Right.
And the essence of it is that you are the creator of your reality.
Yes, you are.
And you're always the creator of your reality.
At all times.
You're never at any time not creating your reality.
Exactly.
The difference is whether or not you're creating your reality consciously or you're creating it unconsciously.
Right.
And the sad fact is, most of us are busy creating our realities unconsciously.
Yes.
We're reacting to our programs.
Yes.
We're reacting to our belief systems
Yes.
that have been programmed into us.
Right.
And as such, we can lose sight of the truth of who I am.
Right.
And that creates the chaos that we're experiencing now. And that's been the result of all the chaos. Keep in mind, we have evolved.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
This society that so many, and trust me, I'll get into this in a moment, but that is right now, this reality that is right now upsetting so many people is heaven compared to
Yes.
the history of
Yes.
mankind.
Oh, yeah. Look at World War II. I understand.
And
Yes.
and all of the other ridiculous things of
Oh, yeah.
killing that
Romans,
we
right.
managed to do over the eons. So we have advanced quite a bit.
Yes.
People talk about perpetual war. Yes, and yet it's not as bad as it's been, and it could be far worse.
Right.
Right.
We want to maintain. I need to maintain that consciousness. Remembering the truth of who I am requires me to say how much of this is my responsibility. And by responsibility, I don't mean fault, because
Right.
responsibility doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, it never means fault. Responsibility means the ability to respond.
And is it also, what is mine to do?
What is mine to do?
Right.
Do I respond? Do I react? What am I going to create? Because
Exactly.
if I remember who I am as a conscious creator, what am I going to choose?
And the first thing I have to do, the first thing I've been working in, is to overcome my fear.
Right.
And my fear manifests in anger. And my fear manifests in feeling upset. And so it's not difficult, and I have experienced that reality of being angry and upset with the things that are going on. And someone could look at me and say, well, you've got every reason to be angry and upset. And they'd be right. But it's my responsibility not to let myself sink into those vibrations that cause me harm.
Right. 100%.
And so I have to figure out, how do I not let it do that? Now, one of the ways is to let myself become deaf and blind. Just don't pay attention. Just don't be in that world. Turn off the TV, turn off
Right,
the
don't engage.
appliances, don't engage, don't listen to it. Sit in your beautiful, and I've got a beautiful bubble, to just be experiencing that.
Right.
I can't do that.
I know. I know that.
I choose not to do that. I have always felt a connection with people in general, particularly with people who are vulnerable, and certainly those members of my particular cultural racial community. So I don't feel good if I'm pretending they don't exist, so that I can live in a world that's calm and peaceful and sweet and lovely and oming and all the time. So how do I find that right balance? And I find the right balance by remembering the truth of who I am as a spiritual being, as spiritual energy, as a being that has the power to manipulate that energy. Now, you made a very, very good reference to that, very good simile to that with regards to the internet. The internet is the mind of God. The internet is that divine consciousness communicating with itself from all its millions of different perspectives and understandings, its different levels of perception. And perception creates reality. That's all reality is.
Right.
Reality is perception. That's it. And how you perceive any given thing in any given moment becomes
Right.
that reality. So I get to recognize that and then learn that if I change my perception, I change my reality. Now, what do I want to perceive?
See, the problem we've had is right now is you look at two siblings. You have a 3-year-old and you have a 7-year-old. They're both boys, right? The 3-year-old is going to learn from the 7-year-old how to do this, how to do that, how to tie their shoe, how to put their jacket on right. And we've had this whole, we've evolved very quickly on this planet as a society, as a species, because you have younger souls learning from older souls.
Right.
Which is the way it's supposed to be. You have love and compassion. This is fear and judgment. And this soul will teach this soul to not judge so harshly and not to be so, violent, not to learn and understand things that are of the soul, not of the vessel. The problem we have now, right now, why things are so divided, is that we have a group of people that have corralled the young souls over here, and they're de-evolving. They're not learning from the old souls. The old souls are bad people. These old souls are communists, they're socialists, and you don't want to learn from them. That's what they're doing right now. And they're like, yeah, we don't have to listen to them, right? That's their mentality right now. And they're just feeding into it, and they're de-evolving. They don't realize as they de-evolve into fear, judgment, and punishment, we don't come here to learn to judge. We come here to learn to overcome judgment itself. As they keep spiraling down, they're adding to the length of their soul's journey here on this planet, because they're going to be adding incarnations to just work through the things that they practiced in this incarnation.
The people who are all experiencing that level of thought are not going to understand what that was.
Right, exactly. They're going to look at algebra and say, that's not math, there's letters in that.
And so
they don't get it.
Exactly. So the question then becomes, okay, so what can I do on this level if I want to do anything at all? Now, I've already determined, as I said, I can't just sit back and watch, or I can't just sit back and ignore. That's just not possible for me. So what can I do? Well, I can get angry, I can yell, I can scream, I can jump up and down, or I can get miserable. I've been experiencing both, trust me.
I think many of us have.
and those aren't working for me.
Right.
And they're not making any changes that I'm thinking of as being helpful. What can I do? I can remember the truth of who I am and the truth of those around me. I can recognize what we say when we say, I see God in everything.
Right.
And that's a challenge.
It is.
That ain't the easiest thing in the world to do.
You know what? I want to give that a few seconds, because really, people have this whole idea that this religion or Bob's religion or Frank's religion or whoever's religion is like, that's their God, this is their God, this is their God. It's like, wait a second. God exists at the atomic level, creating all things through vibration. God creates the vibration for this pen. Bob's God doesn't do it on Mondays, and Phil's doesn't do it on Tuesdays. It's the same God.
Yeah.
So when people are like, well, this religion, that religion, God isn't a religion. When you go back home, Christianity doesn't exist. Judaism doesn't exist. Mormonism doesn't exist. Hinduism doesn't exist. It's only love at all times.
Right.
So when people realize, well, your God is this, and I'm like, no, there's only one God that creates at all times.
So to recognize that, we also got to recognize that God is beautiful and God is extremely ugly. Because, again, perception creates reality.
Right.
And what are my perceptions of beauty and ugliness? And if I can perceive them at all, then I must admit that God can be both.
Right.
Which means also that God can be helpful and God can be hurtful. God can be kind and God can be... If we want to go into that perception of God as all things that exist. So, how do I play a part in that? Well, because I am that too, because I am a divine spirit with equal opportunity to influence and vibrate on that divine level, I can start deciding that's what I'm choosing to do and then find the means by which to do it. This is what we're doing right now. Right now, my power is to have this conversation with y'all. And indirectly with y'all. And that is a power that allows me to vibrate through my words and maybe through my own aura, I'm not sure about that one yet, to expand that vibration out so that y'all start to see things a little bit differently, even if it's that much.
Right.
Even if it's just that much, it's enough of a tweak that can start changing your direction, changing your perception, changing your reality. And that's what remembering who you are is about. It's about remembering that you have that power. You have that power right now. You have that power all the time. When you become conscious of it, that doesn't mean that you have control over it, but at least you're now conscious of it.
Aware.
And then you can start practicing and get better at using it for your good and the good of all those around you. You do that in easy little ways. You do that with little acts of kindness. Mm-hmm. You do that with little moments of joy at hearing a bird sing. Mm-hmm. You do that with saying thank you to someone who just cooked your supper. Mm-hmm. And all of the little ways that you can share little tiny pieces of joy, happiness, pleasure, kindness, love. Mm-hmm. And all of those things accumulate. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are vibrations that set off more vibration. Mm-hmm. When we vibrate love and kindness and connect with someone else from that vibrational level, mm-hmm. we get to then invite them to vibrate that way with you. Mm-hmm. And then we begin a little chain reaction thing happening, because they get to share it with the next one, and they get to share it with the next one, et cetera, et cetera. It may seem like a slow-mo version of change, and it may be a slow-mo version of change. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I believe that it's effective and inevitable. I think that this is what we're really supposed to be experiencing in our life, and learning how to make it more so as we expand our consciousness. Mm-hmm. In my world right now, I've achieved that. Mm-hmm. I mean, look where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And I live in that world throughout my day, every day, mm-hmm. now.
When people realize that they don't come here, the primary reason for somebody to be here isn't to fix somebody else. It's not to develop everybody else's soul. Right. It's to develop your soul. Mm-hmm. Your soul is the primary reason why you're here. You're here to learn unconditional love and to bring back experiences. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that we come here to do, like you're talking about God, and can be beautiful and ugly. Those ugly experiences that we have with our soul cannot be had in heaven. That's why we come here. We can't experience death. We can't experience falling in love, because it always is. Right. We can't hold our child for the first time and feel that within us. It always is on the other side. So we come here to have these experiences of love gained and love lost, because we can't have those anywhere else but here in this 3D reality. It's an optical. It's not. It's an illusion all in itself. Mm-hmm. But the primary reason is we need to come here and develop our own soul and gratitude and learning to be grateful for the things that we have around us, mm-hmm. and to look for the good in things. You know, and we've been programmed for so long to turn on the TV and be programmed to judge, mm-hmm. and live in fear and live in hatred and anger of things, instead of learning love and compassion.
Let's look at that for just a moment. Yeah. Because there's not only the spiritual level of it, there's also the psychological level of it. Yes. And we are, as human beings, physically hardwired to react in fear, mm-hmm. Because the earth is a dangerous place to live on. The world is a dangerous place. Yes. It can hurt you.
Yes, it can.
Therefore, we have the mechanism, I'm not going to go through the physiology, right. to recognize fear, react to fear, remember fear, mm-hmm. and to avoid fear. Right. Mm-hmm. And we get really, really good at it. Mm-hmm. And because as we have evolved intellectually, technologically, we have advanced even beyond our intellect. Mm-hmm. So now we're dealing with things that are not only not natural, but they're at us all the time. You know, there's a light in this room that can be turned on and off. Right. Our primitive mind's going, wait a minute, that's not the way it's supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And yet that's what we've done. So the body reacts to mm-hmm. these things. Mm-hmm. The body's being constantly bombarded by these unusual vibrations. Mm-hmm. Computers and automobiles and helicopters and jet planes and all the stuff of modern society.
And it's all stimulation for that part of our brain that is like having to discern, is that good or bad?
Exactly, and always and at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm. Is that fight or flight?
So we are in that fight and flight mm-hmm. thing, and we have to learn to control that to such a degree that we can still go, and it's okay.
And I think that that's part of remembering who we are, that
Yes.
we are each one and we are all from the same source and we all return from the same source. There is no separation between any of us except for our physical selves.
Right.
In spirit, we are all one. In source and energy, we're all one. In vibration, we are different. And in essence and how we form is different. But what do we do in that moment? Are we going to judge? Are we going to respond negatively? Or are we going to remember we are all learning, growing, and developing here as a soul?
And I think when people realize the problem we have, like you have the Old Testament was for one paradigm, the New Testament was for another paradigm. We're in another paradigm now. We started a new paradigm not too long ago. And people are like, oh, there's going to be a third testament? I'm like, no, we're going to stop trying to find God in a book. So the problem we have right now in this society, if we could get through one thing would fix everything. Quit externalizing God. God isn't up there. God is right there. God is right there. God is right there. God is right there. So when we stop externalizing God and everything I do to you goes to God. Everything I do to you goes to God because that experience, one thing God cannot do. God cannot experience. God is the creator. God is an energy source. God cannot experience. We are representatives of source itself to have those experiences. And every time we mistreat another human being, we're mistreating God. Every time we show love and compassion towards another human being, we're showing love and compassion to God. God isn't up there. God is right here
Right
with
now.
your neighbor. That's why it says, you shall how to treat your neighbor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's when we could just do that, everything will start changing immediately.
And how do we do that? Again, that goes back to, once again, the three spiritual principles.
Right.
That's why the three spiritual principles, which, by the way, are not my concept. They were developed by my mentor, Reverend Dr. James Mellon. And I want to give him full credit for that because I've learned so much from him. And that includes how to understand life from the principles of the three spiritual principles. Love only, forgive everything, and remember who you are. So in order for us to do exactly what you're saying, to start recognizing and evolving and remembering, we want to first allow that we have a tendency to react, recognize that we have that tendency to react,
Absolutely.
learn how to control it so that I'm not always on that edge constantly. I can let it go, know when to let it go. Also begin to see what you're saying. And that takes a willingness to take some time out. That takes a willingness to slow down. These are the physical things, the activities that we want to start engaging in order to create this recognition of the world, changing my perception of the world so that I can start enjoying, I can
Right.
start feeling more gratitude. And loving only, first of all, it's important to recognize that love only doesn't mean like all the time.
Right.
Right.
You don't have to like anything. So here's the thing. I don't hate anyone.
Neither do I.
I don't hate anyone. And because I'm recognizing that my life is always unfolding perfectly, that's another one that's hard to understand. Your life is unfolding perfectly. Yeah, they just bombed my house. How is my life unfolding
Right.
perfectly? Well, I don't know the answer to that particular question because that's not for me to find out. But for my life to be unfolding perfectly, I'm recognizing that something about what's going on here is making us better. Now, if I have that basic belief, something going on here is making us better, what can that be? Well, okay, for one thing, I'm already seeing the world getting shocked into realizing we are going to have to start being serious about taking care of ourselves. We've got a great example of what we don't want to turn into, so let's be really careful that we're not going to lose our democracy.
Right.
Let's learn how to have better conversation with each other so that we're not depending on that guy as much as we've been. So there's some really good stuff going on. Mexico is getting a lot of attention right now. And it's getting a lot of really good attention right now. People are beginning to change their perception
Yes,
of
they
are.
Mexico and Mexicans.
And that paradigm and
They're
consciousness
starting to
is shifting.
recognize it's not this sleepy little country where people sleep under saguaro cacti. They're going to recognize, or are already starting to recognize, Mexico is a country that has not only a lot of ancient and wonderful culture and art, but it's also a powerhouse. It's got resources, and it's got economic viability, and it's a growing concern to the degree that it is rapidly getting the respect of the rest of the world.
About time.
And well, it is about time, but
Yes.
Right.
but it is a direct result of what's going on
Right.
that I don't like.
Right. And the thing
Get
is,
it?
as I
Yes.
tell people, as the pendulum swings one direction, the farther it swings one direction, the farther it's going to swing the opposite direction.
Therefore, I get to allow myself that moment.
Yes, you get to
of,
breathe.
I may not like what's going on,
Right.
but I can recognize that there is this goodness that is also part of that. Are people suffering? Yes.
Right.
Now, to the degree that I can do something about that, I shall.
Yes.
But also, I have to recognize that I need to understand the spiritual perspective of it so that I can more effectively focus my mind in the direction of what it is I want. And I'm very clear now that what I want is more peace, more love, and more happiness. And then it's a question of how do I create that? I'm real good at doing it within my own personal sphere of influence. Now
Right.
I want to expand that out more and more. Once again, that's what we're doing right now. When I do my TikTok videos, it's the same thing. These are some of the ways, maybe not the most effective way, but maybe not the least effective way either,
Yeah.
of reaching out and connecting with someone whom I don't know, but who is feeling the vibe of what it is I'm trying to say and says, you know what, that vibrates really well with me. I like that idea.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm going to start considering that idea.
Right.
And if more of us do that kind of thing, with that kind of perspective, we have that kind of influence over people. People react to the anger because it creates fear. And it's a very powerful energy.
Right.
But if we can let people feel safe, if we can let people recognize the power of love, we can overcome the fear because it feels better when you're feeling relaxed and comfortable.
So to get back to what you were saying, I 100% agree with you. To put out that energy of love and compassion, we'll say towards Mexico or towards people coming from Mexico, love and compassion, they're still going to have those second graders that aren't going to understand that. And they're going to reject that. But you said fear is a big motivator. Now I'm going to tell you this. This person right over here that's going to reject the love and compassion of Mexico and its people, or people south of there. It's just a matter of time before it's their turn to be south of that border. And their experience is determined upon the karma they created for themselves in previous incarnations. So if you're a kind of person that leaves water out in the desert so people coming across the border won't die of thirst, when you're born on the south side of that border, it's going to be great. If you're a person that stands there with an assault rifle ready to shoot them, your experience is not going to be the same when you're born south of the border. We're here hundreds of times. The chance of you being born south of the border is guaranteed.
So you're talking about karma.
Karma,
Cosmic balance.
It
Cosmic
plays
law.
plays out.
It
and
always
it,
keeps
and it
everything in
determines
balance.
it has repercussions on how your journey will go, how difficult or how good it will go, depending on the karma you accrued for yourself.
I do want to break down karma just for a second because
Please.
sometimes people have the idea that karma is like eye for an eye. So I do this, so this exact same thing is going to happen to me. I shoot somebody, karma, I'm going to get shot. Not necessarily in the conditions of how things unfold, because we live in a cause and effect universe.
Right.
So we believe that our soul comes here to go through certain lessons and experiences to develop. So just like that 2-year-old, they're not going to learn unless they go through that process of whatever it is that they came here to learn in that time. So let's speak a little bit about karma, how karma is created by the energy and vibration of God to keep everything in balance. And we've talked about that in our previous shows and in the book, but if we could just break down the idea of karma just for a moment.
So we'll look at the LGBT community.
Okay.
All right. LGBTQ community, say you treat them with dignity and respect and compassion,
Okay.
right? And it's your turn for your soul to switch genders, right? It's your turn to switch genders and be part of the LGBTQ community.
Because as a soul, we are not a gender. We are not our body. Right.
It even says it in the
Correct.
Bible, we're not
Right.
our gender.
No.
Right.
So we're beings of light. And our soul, our vessels kind of imprint onto our souls over time. So if you're a female many times in a row and you become a male, you will still have some tendencies of the female gender. And once your turn to switch over, you may be in Frisco. You may be in San Francisco where you're accepted and you have parades and it's great, right? And it's not bad. But then again, if you were judgmental and angry and abusive towards the LGBT community,
And you create that vibration.
you may have to do that in Mississippi. You may have to change gender in Mississippi. If you are actually violent against the LGBT community, right, you may have to do it in Iran.
Creating more hate and division.
Right. That's why, why would anybody choose? Because we choose our lifetimes. We choose our incarnations. And we plan them out. They're like, why? I would never plan this. You'd absolutely plan this. If you don't plan it, it may take 300 lifetimes to learn unconditional love. If you plan it out, it may only take 100.
Just like
so
they
we
say,
plan them out.
We pick our parents.
We pick our parents.
We pick our parents. Parents, pick their children to learn and to have that relationship
Right.
for the soul development.
We learn what to do, and we learn what not to do from our parents. We take the meat and leave the bone.
Your perception of the millennia, the repetition of, again, we're using terms that are irrelevant to the universe. There's no millennia in universe.
Right.
Exactly. No time on the sides of the veil, right.
But we're perceiving it as return.
Yes.
Return.
I just think of it as a process.
And that is valid and an important perception of what it is that we're doing, what is that it's all, how does it work? My personal interest is what's going on now. What's this experience right now as I'm existing in this world as David Allan Cruz? And how do I, first of all, how did I get to this level of understanding? What was it that was going on? And I think that there's part of it that is valid with regards to your argument, because I perceive that I have always been this way to one, even as a child, to one degree or another.
It's innate knowledge.
I was always drawn to that vibration. That's the only word I'm going to use that makes any sense to me. So that has expanded out. And my job, my purpose, is to help people remember what you're talking about. Remember the truth of who you are. You are an evolved soul. You are on a journey. You are continually evolving.
Right.
You're learning more and more and more. And to bring that consciousness into this life experience so that they can find the means for each individual to create the joy that they want to create and avoid creating the pain that they probably don't want to create.
Right. And that's why I even talk about karma and reincarnation. If you knew what the repercussions were, you may have a chance in this moment to pull way back on your judgments, way back on how you see the world. I've had people in the back of my car when I'm doing rideshare, and they're just like, oh my God, you just changed my life right now. I'm totally I'm just going to leave all that judgment behind because I understand how it works now. I have a clue. It's not just some scripture somewhere. It is actual. That makes absolute sense, and I can rely on me not being so judgmental in this moment and start working towards actually acceptance of others in this moment.
So here's another challenge.
Yeah.
What about those individuals that do exist, they always have existed, they still exist, who are more than willing to do harm, that they take pleasure out of causing harm, whether it be social harm or physical harm?
Yes. Younger souls.
Right.
Well,
I'm a mom. I was a teacher, so I always think of in terms of children. And that's why I've been talking about the 2-year-old. But again, those younger children, they're going to react a certain way. They're going to respond a certain way. They're going to steal their friends' candy. They're going to, they're going to be bullies. They're going to be this and that. Are they bad people? No. Are they just younger in their developmental age? Absolutely. But as they grow, okay, but then what if they don't develop so mentally or emotionally in that way to realize what's right and wrong, because they haven't had that understanding and that experience yet. They haven't understood, oh, I don't like the way it feels when that happens to me. Oh, maybe I'm not going to do that to other people, because we live in a cause and effect universe. We understand that. So they don't understand, those people don't understand yet that they are creating an effect for themselves and creating the effect for everybody else, because we are all one. So until that soul has that innate understanding, and then the physical understanding can happen through the brain and cognitive and everything, then changes won't happen. So that's why having these conversations, we talk about here that we talk about the things that inspire us to think better, to feel better vibrationally and energetically, and then do better, act better.
So how do you then interact with a brute?
A brute. So love unconditionally, right? You love always. You have to love yourself too.
Yeah.
And moving yourself away from that energy. That energy, you can't change it. You can't change that young energy by a word or a sentence or a paragraph or a book. You can't do it. It's just too young.
Okay.
And as I like to tell people, there is no such thing as good and bad. There's only perpetual learning, with karma keeping everything in balance.
Okay.
So whatever he dishes out or she dishes out will return to it. And now that we're in this new paradigm, it's much more interactive. It's not going to happen a lifetime or 2 or 3 from now. It may happen next month. You know what I'm saying? Karma's much more fast acting. It's much more interactive.
Instant karma's going to get you.
I love that song, right? But realistically, who I was 50 lifetimes ago isn't who I am now. Who you were 50 lifetimes ago isn't who you are now.
Correct.
You have innate wisdom and love that you've developed. Younger souls don't have it. I'm not going to invite axe murderers to my... I love always. I'm not going to invite axe murderers to my house. It's the energy I don't want around me, because I love myself also. But not that I don't hate them.
So,
and they're not bad. They're just not.
Okay,
they're
so
not.
Go back to what
wise.
you just said.
Yes.
Energy that you don't...
I don't want to have around
Around
me.
me.
I keep away from me.
Okay, how do you do that?
You can't make them move. You have to move away from them, and that's where the meek inherit the earth. The passive, right? You learn to be passive and not to interact with it and to pull away from that.
So what if it's a continuous advance? In other words, they just keep on coming, just keep on backing away.
And you can't walk away. You can't.
What is the level where you and I don't have necessarily the answer.
Yes.
Because my first tendency
relative,
is to do what you said. Just
Right.
love only, love only, love only, love anyway, love anyway, love anyway.
Right.
But remember, love doesn't mean
anyway.
like.
Right.
Right.
And we have part of our responsibility is to take care of ourselves.
Love yourself. Yes.
Yes.
So at what point do I stop retreating, or do I want to just leave the whole thing altogether, be somewhere else, or confront?
What type of bullying is it? Is it?
We don't know yet.
Is it physical? Is it
Right.
psychological, emotional? What is it?
Is it people dressed in military uniforms coming knocking on your door with
Right.
assault rifles?
Right.
I mean, what do you do?
Because there's different
Right.
degrees to that
Right.
scenario there.
And at what point do we? And this, I'm legitimately asking the question.
Yes.
Because I do believe in love only and forgive everything.
Right.
And
What am I remembering about myself that says, and you can handle this in the most effective way, and here's the most effective way.
With that situation right there, armed people coming to your door, military, whatever, coming to your door, you're passive. Nothing can hurt you. Your soul lives forever. And I've said this to many times to many people. I'm not afraid to die because I know what's on the other side of the veil, and it only comes when it's supposed to.
So mass, what are they called? Mass
Suicides?
No.
Deportation?
Mass protests
Mass protest, yes.
are a form of resistance. It's not passive resistance.
Right.
It's active resistance, not aggressive resistance.
Not
either.
aggressive,
It's
not aggressive.
active resistance, but it's. Is there a level of love only in that kind of active resistance?
Well, I see. That depends on, like you said, when it becomes aggressive, then no. If you're standing there holding a sign and you have the permit to be there from hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you're there from those hours, cool, good to go. At 5 p.m. you start making your way out. But if you're going to be aggressive, you're going to, break into
Cause
buildings,
harm and
you're going to storm the
destruction.
Capitol, then no. Then it becomes aggressive. Then you're not supporting your cause anymore. You're hurting it. Because now you're making yourself out to be the bad guy.
So a big part of the equal rights movement
Yes.
was active protest,
Active protest.
active resistance.
Yes.
That sometimes turned violent.
It did.
And it's a valid argument to say that the violence was just as effective and perhaps in some degree more so than the passive resistance. So it's the question of who was right, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. And to a larger degree, removed from that scenario now, we can look at it and say, yeah, both.
Yeah.
Is that still a spiritual concept? Can there be aggressive resistance and still be considered love only?
Brandy, will you read that sign behind me real quick?
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering.
And when that suffering gets too high, then you have the Malcolm X's. They act out with violence. When the suffering gets too high, violence happens. It's important to start your protesting before it gets so high that you become violent.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. It would be nice.
But both with the equal rights movement and with the anti-war movement of Vietnam in that period, the passive resistance wasn't being as effective. It was.
Takes longer.
It takes a lot longer.
Yes.
And a lot more people were dying, and a lot more people were being jailed, and a lot more people were being restricted of their rights. So once again, the argument is that a big part of the success of those movements, and I would include the Chicano power movement in that scenario, because that was also going on simultaneously, was that the violence was effective, and it did help speed up the major changes that we've seen.
It was bringing attention.
So the question becomes, is that a viable direction?
For some.
On a spiritual level.
On a spiritual level. See, that's where I'm like, ugh. Because when they were violent, when these people were violent against another human, even though they were wearing, police uniforms or military uniforms.
Let me be clear. I'm not condoning physical. I'm not condoning. I don't
either.
mean shooting or killing or hurting anyone else.
Right.
But I am talking about some of the destruction that went on, the attacking some of the buildings and doing that kind of a thing.
All right. So attacking a building, it's an inanimate object. They would have to deal with the person that
They'd have
lost
to deal with the consequences.
The consequences.
Right, cause and effect.
Cause and effect here. Cause and effect on the other side depend. Was it a state building or was it like a business?
Regardless. The point I'm making is that then still viably a spiritual aspect? Would that be under the heading of love only?
No. Nope.
Even if it's a passive protest.
Even if it's a violent protest. Because what are wars? Wars are violent protests. But we
It's not a love only, though.
we allow wars to happen.
Right.
It's not love only.
So how does active, at what point does active protest lose that spiritual viability?
Once it becomes violent. And even though it may have worked faster, Because there's no violence on the other side of the veil, only love.
Remember that your life is always unfolding perfectly.
Right. So I always look at this. We're talking about wars just for 1 second. We still have wars today because we still externalize God.
Because we believe in war.
Well, a lot of people at the top just love war, right?
We believe in war.
But when people realize the person you're killing, that experience goes back to source.
Correct.
And you will have to be killed in return. If you kill for our flag on this side of the veil, guess how many flags there are? 0. Guess how many countries there are? 0. You fight for a cross. It doesn't exist on this side of the veil.
Correct.
You fought out of fear, especially if you're in somebody else's country.
Correct.
Right. So once you become violent, then that takes it away. No, you're not being spiritually led anymore. You have to be passive, meek and inherit the earth, not the aggressive. When you get to the point to where you are causing physical harm, especially to a person, then no, it's not. Now I always explain, well, is all killing bad? No, some's done out of love. You have your grandmother sitting on the front porch drinking tea, and she's accosted by somebody, and you take a gun and you shoot them, right? You are killing out of love for the grandmother. You're in another country killing somebody. You're not killing for love. You're killing out of fear of a potential. Mm-hmm. So that's not washed away because you're Christian or whatever. But the one that you killed because you're protecting somebody within your family, that was a response. That was an act of love to protect that person. Me, I probably still wouldn't shoot him in the chest. I'd probably shoot him in the lower extremities to stop them. Mm-hmm. But if that didn't work, then I'd have to. But if it's done out of love, it's different. That's an act of love to protect somebody. When you're in a war and you got 2 lines of guys shooting at each other, you're not protecting anybody. You're just killing out of a potential.
So where does love only come into that scenario, though? Like with the grandma and or somebody protecting somebody else, where does that love only and forgive everything come into that scenario? Because if I'm still living in that fear that I have to protect someone or something, and then I'm looking at that separate. So it's hard.
Ideally, you allow your mind to create a lifestyle in which you're not having to deal with that.
Right.
That's ideal.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, we, at least those of us sitting in this room right now, have achieved that. Mm-hmm. We're not under
to a
attack.
certain degree.
We're not under attack every day.
Right.
We have very little likelihood of being under attack.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a possibility that something could happen that would, and we do our best to avoid that. We do our best by creating passive defense mechanisms.
Right.
So ideally, that's the way we want to deal with it. Ideally, what we want to do is we want to allow ourselves to recognize, I, as a creator of my reality, choose to find the means by which to not invite violence into my personal existence. Because it exists because people believe that it exists. It exists because people still get a thrill out of the concept of war. That people still think there's value in war. That they're going to somehow gain, what they're going to gain from it is equal to the destruction and the murder that they've participated in.
Right. They just don't know. And if they knew that all the people they killed, those experiences go to source.
And we don't use words directly as we should. We use the word war and campaigns and self-defense and all of these kinds of terminologies. And what we need to start doing is using words that are more direct. War is murder.
Yes,
Right.
war is murder.
You're murdering someone.
Because what is the intent there in the war, right?
Right.
Is to destroy.
It's destroy.
So you are literally murdering another person. You may justify that, perhaps. You may find some way of saying, well, that's okay or that's necessary, but you're still murdering somebody.
Right.
And when we start thinking of it from that perspective, then it may be less inviting to other people.
Right.
When we start turning warriors into heroes and allow warriors to recognize they're warriors because they choose to be warriors.
Right.
that doesn't necessarily make them heroes.
Right.
And we stop glorifying that choice, then perhaps people will be less likely to want to be those warriors, and to stop killing other people at the behest of someone because that someone wants to gain from the war.
Right. And we look at when we look at what you just said with being made into heroes, younger souls will always look at seeing killing others for gain somewhere else or because it was an order as being okay.
Because it's power.
And it's validated because I'm doing it for this flag, or if I'm doing it for this cross, or I'm doing it for my family.
It's my job,
whatever, it's my job.
Yeah.
You didn't have to take that job. They don't realize when you go back home, you will see all viable potentials of not doing it, and you chose to do it anyway. So if a cop decides to use his 9mm instead of a taser because the person was black, all intent is known on the other side of the veil.
I have a question. So say somebody is ordered to kill somebody else or be killed. How does that work? Because now the person has to make a choice.
Right.
Do I end somebody else's life or do I end mine? It's not going to end well, but on a soul developmental level, what does one do?
Simple. Make it quick. I'd say make it quick. I'm not going to do that, and I've won. When I go return back home, I pass that test. I pass that test, and I will come back, and it'll be fine. You cannot hurt me. Matter of fact, with my NDE research, people that have many of them that have died, when they returned to heaven, they did not know why they were there. When all potentials are gone, your soul is taken out before it happens. So before that hammer even hit, I was already gone. When all potentials are gone, you're not here to suffer. We're here to learn until our time is up. I wouldn't even known it. It's been painless. Make it quick. Yeah. There's one lady, she was skiing. And she's like, why am I here? She goes, oh, you drowned. Her legs got caught up in the rope and they didn't stop the boat. They're like, you drowned. I didn't even know what happened. I got pulled out before that even happened.
Yeah.
I was still above water when that happened.
So Todd was an NDE researcher for over 10 years, and so he researched, the experiences that people had during a near-death experience and what happened to them during their time away before they came back. And then he compiled all these different stories and pulled these commonalities and came up with his understanding of life and our purpose.
And that's literally what I asked Source for. I asked her, I want to know how things worked. Because I was going to church and there was hypocrisy that I could not handle.
In a traditional church.
In a traditional church. And I got mad and I said, I want to know how things work. And then I ran into a friend I hadn't seen in 20 years. And he goes, hey, Todd, check out this near-death experience testimonial. I'm like, oh my God, there's some of the answers I was looking for. And then I did another, and another, and another. And then before you know it, I was consuming every night. I was consuming testimonials. And these are people that lived in different countries, different decades, different religions, all saying the same thing.
So
I was like,
variables.
They're all saying the same thing. They're not coming up with the same lie. They didn't know each other. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is viable. This has something to it that I can use. So one of the things that was a common thread through all the NDEs was altruism.
Altruism.
Every soul puts every other soul on equal to or above them. So we're always helping each other. There's no fear, there's no judgment, there's no hate. We're always working to help each other within our soul groups and outside our soul groups. And when we learn to be altruistic here, that transforms our lives and transforms the lives around us. Because that is a constant. Altruism is not socialism. Altruism is not communism. Altruism is a love for source. And when we learn that, that's when we get to the next level of evolution for our society and our species.
Thank you. And I think that points to remember who you are.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's been mine. It's been fascinating.
Any
Thank
final
you.
thoughts today on this amazing in-depth conversation that
I
went
do want
lots
to
of
say
different
this.
ways?
Congratulations to you guys.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for the honor of being the first guest
Yes, it's
Yes.
lovely.
on this particular series.
Thank you
And,
for saying yes.
Oh, I was so looking forward. It was a real pleasure. And you guys have a an amazing space. You guys have an amazing energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing it. Thank you for being an oasis
Thank you.
and radiating this love, this beauty, and this joy.
Thank you.
So-
You know, this is a place where, again, we talk about these things and then we get to apply them to our lives and assist other people in this information, you know, this understanding.
And thank you for saying yes, because we always looked up to you as being a great speaker and with great wisdom and knowledge
Thank you.
that you can share in a way that everybody can understand. And we appreciate that and we value that.
I
So
appreciate
that's why
that.
we asked
Thank
you
you.
to be on our show first. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So in closing today, we remind ourselves to love only, forgive everything, and to remember who you are. Thank you for being here.
Namaste.
Namaste.